Okay, my grandfather flew B-24 in the Second World War. He was based in Italy and part of the 15th Air Corps. He was shot down, wounded, and captured. Only four of the crew members managed to bail out. Uh, what is it? He was eventually liberated by the Russians, and that's it.
Do I just start? Okay, my great-grandfather was a tank driver in World War II, and they were going down a road, and he saw something that he thought was suspicious on the left, and that's where they were supposed to go. So he said, I'm not going that way. You can go that way. I'm going this way with whoever wants to come. So some of the people went with him. I think it was about like 4 tanks and a couple hundred soldiers went with him, and the rest of them went that way. The ones that went with him ended up living, but everyone that went that way ended up dying by like little sneak attack through the woods. So he came back and he got some medals and stuff. Yeah.
My grandfather died. Wait. Restart. What? Oh, my grandfather died before my great. No way. My great grandfather died before my grandfather born. Then, when my great father was, I think it's 17. My grandmother died. Then my great father go to my uncle's house. Then he lived there like 6 years, I think. Then he just like go away. Done.
My stepmom, she was a very picky person, but when she said she wanted something, that usually meant she really wanted it. So her father asked her what she wanted for dinner, and she's like, okay, I want potatoes. And that's all she would eat, potatoes. She never had a problem with them. He made the potatoes. He's like, how much do you want? She's, I want all the potatoes. And he put about 8 potatoes in the pot when he made the potatoes. And she wanted to eat them all. She took one bite and said she did not like them. And he said whatever she had on her plate, she had to eat. She didn't want to eat them, and they got into a huge fight. And in result for fighting with her father, he threw all the potatoes in her face.
When I was about 4 years old, me and my stepfather went to a jewelry store to buy my mom a wedding ring. And it was the day before Valentine's Day. And when we got home, I was sitting down doing my homework, and my dad was cooking. And my mom came home, and I turned around and I looked at Mom, and I'm like, hey, Mom, guess what we did? And my dad's looking, he's like, you know, what are you talking about? And I was like, we bought you a ring, a really pretty one. And he's just sitting there with the he's just standing there at the stove with the spatula in his hand, like, you weren't supposed to tell her. You weren't supposed to tell her. So from this day on, my mom considers, instead of my dad proposing to her, as me and my dad.
Can I go last? No? I don't know how to start it though. It's not like I was told about the story about when my great uncle was put on Valium after having a surgery on his left hip once he was put on Valium, he did things he shouldn't have done, and one of them was that he climbed to the top of a tree thinking he could fly, and had his mom there on the side, and He said, "Hey mom, look at me, I could fly," and he jumped off the tree and ended up breaking his arm. It was something hysterical. It was something that I think should be told and should be kept going on and be told again and again. So.
Once my grandfather's friend won the lottery and he won $100,000, but in a month he lost it all because he spent it all on supplies he didn't need. Since that day, my grandfather always said never to think that you have so much or else you will lose it all, and never to be so greedy.
In the time when the Korean War was going on, my grandfather was being shipped over there. But during the time he was being shipped over, the Korean War ended. So he actually went over to Italy, and where there were many wars going on. And he was sent over to play baseball against other campsites to entertain the servicemen. And after all that was over, he actually played against, he actually played in a professional team.
A really long time ago, I'd say about 12 generations ago, on my dad's side of the family, all the boys are named Charles, and my mom had like 2 boys, and the first one she named Charles, but he passed away, so she named the second one Charles too. And my brother said he's gonna continue the generation's name, and he's gonna name his son, if he has one, Charles. So it's cool.
In about August of 2009, my brother was in a boot camp for the Navy, and he said he was so anxious for it to be over because they had to like take certain tests, they had to learn certain regulations, and they had to like practice to like be physically fit. And I just like find it really cool because like you don't really see people as young as him, which he was about like 19 or 20. You don't really see them like talking about it, but he's like extremely proud about it, like, and he was training to be a military SEAL.
So my great-great-grandfather sent my great-grandmother to America, and they're from Spain, to escape from the Spanish Civil War and to start a new life here. So she snuck on a boat to come here, and she was on there for a while, and she had nothing to eat, and there was all rats at the bottom of the ship. So, and then there was like milk, and then that was the only thing she had to drink or eat, so she had no choice but to do that. And then they started a new life in America.
During World War II, my grandfather was fighting in it, and they used to take like grenades and like ammunition home and send it home for like the family. And my grandmother's had one in a dresser in the attic, and she had somebody clean out the attic, and they found it, and the guy was cleaning it out started freaking out about it, and my grandmother was telling him not to worry about it because the kids used to play catch with the grenade because it wasn't like armed or anything. And eventually like he ended up calling the police and everything, and they took it away. But it's funny because like it was passed down because it was funny, and it was like something that my grandfather did. So yeah.
So when my brother was in Iraq for the war, he was doing a mission to deliver these 7 trucks full of food to 2,500 soldiers, and there were 3 trucks, and he was in the 3rd one. when he was driving on the second day, and he was next to an ID, and it blew up and made his Humvee roll, and the medic got him out of the truck, and he didn't know what was going on until he actually heard the 50 caliber shooting the rounds at the terrorist. So that's when he realized he's like being ambushed. So he got his M4 and started shooting back. And once the firefight was over, one of his soldiers said, "Sarge, look at your leg, right leg," and he noticed that it was bleeding completely. So they got a helicopter over and they did surgery on his leg, or else he was gonna have to get the whole leg off.
Hey, I'm gonna introduce you to a story that happened from my lifetime of the 13 years. I know people usually use stories from their uncles or their grandparents or something like that, but this is something that happened to me personally. Around 2002, when I was 5 years old, I gotta say kindergarten, I was in, I was diagnosed with a disease that would completely turn my world upside down. My family, this affected everyone dramatically for 8 years. My hip, which was supposed to be like an orange, I guess you could say, in the pelvis, turned into a potato. And every time I would walk, it felt like I was hearing nails up against a chalkboard going again and again and again. Every time I would just take a step, excruciating pain. Going through school, most first grade, I was through a wheelchair until I gave up on the whole situation until I had to have surgery to get my hip out of there, until my mother had enough of me just watching me in agony. I'd be on crazy amount of meds every day until my mom found this #1 leading surgeon in the U.S. over in Mount Sinai Hospital, Baltimore, Maryland. We did a 6-hour drive. This guy is great. Dr. Sean Standard was his name. He has helped over 150 kids at least a year with my kind of symptoms and everything, try to recover, salvage at least what their life could have been, because I know I have lost 8 years of at least outdoor activities and fun. I am a baseball player. I have tried to play baseball for the past 5 years. I have never been able to play as well as I have been today with what has happened to me. My hip was reconstructed in 2011, May 24th. I had 5 screws stuck in my hip, and I was placed on Oxycontins, codones, Valium, you name it, I was on it. I was high off of everything. So after all this is done, the one thing I've learned through all this is that life is hard. I'm hoping that this will go down and like everyone will learn that just never give up, keep pushing forward, and if you do everything the way you think it should be done, everything will turn out right in the end.
Nobody knows what my last name is, because my great-grandparents came over from a country in Europe called Lithuania, and to get on the boat to cross the Atlantic Ocean, they had to give the authorities our last name, and of course they had spoken it in their native language. So the man that was taking down the names only wrote what he heard. So my last name could be anything out there. It's just random.
My great-grandfather came to America during the Armenian genocide. The Turkish government wanted to kill pretty much all of the Armenians. It was said because they ran very profitable businesses, and my grandfather came from a very big family that ran one of those businesses. When the genocide started to get really ugly is when my grandfather actually decided to move to America, and before he left, he saw his parents and several of his brothers get killed, and he helped a young woman escape with him by quickly marrying her before they left. So him, his wife, one brother, and two sisters made it over to America. And once they got here, my great-grandfather divorced the wife he married in Armenia and moved out to California.
My story's about how my mom and dad immigrated to the U.S. from India. It's kind of an interesting story. My mom and dad knew each other in India. My mom's dad was a professor there, and he gave tuitions to my dad. And so they knew each other for a very long time, and then they fell in love. And in 1991, my mom moved to America. She was 21, and it was always her dream to come here and start a new life. And she had to come here before she was 21, otherwise it would be very difficult for her to get citizenship here. When she came here, she left her family and friends, everything behind, and she moved in with her aunt and uncle in Virginia, and she planned to do her MBA there. In 1992, my dad was coming to the U.S. for business. He wanted to meet my mom in Virginia. He was in New York, and he asked his boss if he could attend a conference in Virginia so that he didn't have to pay for tickets from New York to Virginia. And the boss gave him the opportunity to come to the conference, and so he got to come to Virginia and meet my mom there. When he came to Virginia, he decided to stay here, and they wanted to go on a tour of the U.S., but my mom's uncles wouldn't allow her to go with my dad because they weren't married. So they said that you have to get married, and my mom made a compromise saying that, well, okay, we'll get engaged. So they got engaged in Virginia, and then they went on a tour of the entire U.S. They went to many different places. They stayed in California after that, and they did really odd jobs, and they worked in restaurants, and my mom worked at a laundromat, and they lived on like bread and butter and stayed in a small apartment. And then they decided to come back to the East Coast so that they could be near my mom's family. So they went to New Jersey, and there one of my dad's really good friends lived in Connecticut, and he got in touch with my dad, and he said that he's going to bring them to Connecticut. So he comes in the middle, like really late at night, and he picks them up and brings them to Connecticut. And there they stay for a while, and my mom gets a good job at a Baby Club of America after working at a laundromat, actually. And my dad was working at a motel for a year, and then she gets the job at Baby Club of America. And my dad starts his own business later on, and right now they still have the same jobs, and they moved many places in Connecticut, and now we live in Wallingford.
My grandma and grandpa both came from Sicily, Italy. They met and married in the U.S., and my great-grandma was a seamstress that fixed and hemmed dresses, and my great-grandpa owned an Italian cigar factory, and then later in life he was a labor boss. And great-grandma lived until 80, and great-grandpa lived until 98. And I thought this story was interesting because I never knew anything before this about my great-grandma and great-grandpa.
When my grandma's Uncle Tommy used to tell stories at dinner, he always said that he had to wear his clothes, the same clothes for 30 days straight, and they always became wet and dry because he was in a bunker in the Marine Corps. And he always said that there were 250 people in his bunker, and he was one of 6 that survived.
So my grandpa, he was part of the London Navy during World War II, and like he was the captain of his ship. So like they were somewhere on the Indian Ocean at that time, and in the distance they saw another ship. They weren't sure if it was an enemy ship or another warship, so he contacted London and asked and like described the characteristics and asked, is this like
a threat to us. And they said that it's no threat and it's just a regular training ship. But then, like, he had a gut feeling that this wasn't just a regular training ship. And so he told his, like, crew to, like, bomb it anyways. But then what ended up happening, and so they were reluctant to, bomb it because they weren't sure if they were hurting innocent people. But then they did, and what ended up happening was that was a Japanese enemy warship that was heading towards London at that time, and that if he didn't tell his crew to bomb it and listen to London instead, London would have been like, I guess you can say there would be more people dead in London, and for like protecting his country, he received a Royal Navy Medal.
Back when my dad was younger, he had witnessed a war between my country, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. This war was for Bangladesh to have independence against Pakistan because they used to be one big country. And at the time, he was only about my age, which is 13. And in the middle of all that, he was stuck in the war, and he had no home, no transportation, and no food. So he had to take his family, which was his mom and his 7 other siblings, and had to go stay with a stranger woman that he never met before. They stayed there for almost a month, and the woman agreed to have them with them and just fed them every single day. And after that, she asked them if they would like to stay longer, but since the war had gotten off, they went back to their village and stayed there.
There was one Christmas that my sister woke up first and woke me and my brother up, and we went to my mom and stepdad's room to open the presents, but we had to wait until 7. So we waited, and then finally arrived. We opened the presents, and I had my Xbox when I was playing, but I didn't have it Christmas. I got before it. And me and my sister drinking chocolate milk, and she tripped and spilled it all over it. And I got really mad, and she was laughing, and I chased her, but she locked the door in the bathroom. And this day forward, she still thinks it's funny when she drinks chocolate milk and reminds me about it.